The Economic and Community Development Commission's agenda for Monday, August 1st, includes an item for planning and zoning applications and engagement assigned to Catherine Gelfman and Bob Knight, with special guest Planning and Zoning Director Alice Dew. This may reflect the Planning and Zoning Commission's referral of application A-22-1 for the ECDC's input. Planning and Zoning had this discussion at their July 26 meeting, even though it was not on their agenda, nor was it added to the agenda by a 2/3 vote of the Commission, while under the watchful eye of Ms. Dew. This violated the Freedom of Information Act and provides the applicant grounds to appeal should the Commission choose to deny the application. A link to a video covering this violation is supplied separately. The proposed amendment should not be controversial. It is merely the update of an existing zoning regulation that already prohibits recreation and medical businesses that grow and dispense marijuana products. It only brings the existing regulation into compliance with new Connecticut cannabis regulations and the town policy adopted by the Board of Selectmen before the Ridgefield moratorium expires on September 24th. And it is modeled after New Canaan's amended zoning regulation passed in December of last year. It is good that the ECDC is being given the opportunity to officially weigh in on this as a commission, as members of the commission have repeatedly presented themselves as speaking on your behalf. Though they presented themselves as speaking for you, when asked if you had ever voted on this, they gibbered this.
I don't know, we never received a vote from, did you vote, ECDC? Did the ECDC vote?
I'm trying to remember to tell you the truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, Mr. Carr.
We have no voting authority. We put out recommendations.
Go ahead.
After combing the minutes, it appears that you have never voted one way or the other on this topic. But what have they said publicly on the Commission's behalf? Here is former Chairman Jeff Morris.
I know that you all have, the board has been against allowing the sale of marijuana in the town of Ridgefield. And I know that you had some hearings and then voted against it, and now we're pushing this. And I think it's very short-sighted. I think 2 and 3 years down the road, when you're looking for an extra $1 million or $2 in your budget, I think you're going to say, well, we gave up that medical marijuana taxes and economic development, but at least we don't have any prostitutes on the streets.
Followed by the current ECDC Chair, Glory Norwit.
To continue on with what Jeffrey Morris was saying, he's with the Economic and Community Development Commission with me, and as you know, the ECDC made a statement saying that we believe economic development should really be considered more thoroughly here. And even if the Board of Selectmen doesn't want to have retail sales, there are so many other types of businesses related to marijuana, such as the growing, the cultivating, and we're disallowing everything. When it seems like what people are really, if anyone's concerned about this, it's really just about retail sales, and we are blanketly saying we can't have anything. And this should be a consideration in economic development.
Thank you.
These statements together are incoherent, as only retail dispensaries selling presumably to adults will collect any local sales tax. None of the other businesses permitted under the new state statute will contribute to local revenues any differently than any other business. And even if the town permitted dispensaries, that 3% sales tax represents just 11 cents on the dollar of state and local taxes collected. 89 cents goes to Hartford, including 66 cents in excise tax and 23 cents in state sales tax. Okay, so maybe the taxes aren't that compelling for Ridgefield. Meg Sanders of Cana Provisions of Massachusetts told the ECDC at their public hearing in August of 2021, don't do it for the taxes, do it for the development opportunities.
Understanding of this isn't just about taxes, this is about jobs. This is about benefiting your town in a lot of ways. I have 112 employees at my Lee dispensary. 112 in a town of 2,500 people. I'm a significant employer, and that has made a big impact in a town that doesn't have a lot of industry.
To the uninformed, the commercial opportunity of cannabis, though hollow, can be blinding. The jobs it promises, the storefront it could occupy, the tourism it could attract, and the taxes it could generate. But all that glitters is not gold, and all of that promise can quickly evaporate into a distant mirage. The Cannabis Industry Association explains why in this excerpted video about an arcane section of the federal tax code, Section 280E, and its dire consequences in their own words.
You've probably heard about the green rush sweeping the nation. Although the cannabis plant is still federally illegal, in the 29 states plus DC where it is legal for adults or medical use, businesses are now legitimately growing it, selling it, and everything in between. You may think these businesses are swimming in profits, but what you may not know is that they're being taxed at an insanely high rate thanks to a little thing called Section 280E of the IRS tax code, making tax season for a cannabis business owner a real bummer. Imagine paying an effective tax rate 3.5 times higher than the business next door to you because you were forbidden from taking normal business deductions, such as payroll, rent, and other common costs of doing business. Cannabis dispensaries and cultivators are paying an effective tax rate of 70% or higher. By comparison, the corporate tax rate established by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 is 21%. The effect of this is that licensed cannabis businesses cannot invest as much in capital improvements or things like employee raises and benefits, hiring more employees, expanding operations, or giving back to the community. The disadvantages are numerous, from high turnover to higher prices, which drives customers back into the criminal market, and criminals don't file tax returns. Cannabis remains a Schedule I controlled substance according to the federal government, so this penalty applies to licensed cannabis businesses that operate in compliance with state laws and regulations. This means real problems for state legal cannabis businesses who are staying compliant while attempting to grow. Meanwhile, it has no effect on illegal operations that don't file tax returns. While cannabis businesses can't even deduct many of the costs incurred in staying compliant. To learn more, visit NCIA's website at www.thecannabisindustry.org.
2 points merit emphasis. Confiscatory taxes impair cannabis businesses from doing many good things, including giving back to the community. Lawmakers may have been naive if they thought legalizing cannabis would end the illegal marijuana trade, including the scourge of fentanyl. This is no exaggeration. How bad is it? Well, it's so bad that California appropriated $100 million to bail out its legal pot business as it struggles to compete with a thriving illegal market. To better understand the economics of the marijuana trade, here is Jared Kelo, proprietor of the High Path Dispensary in San Francisco, in a 2020 NBC interview.
How much is a pound of marijuana taxed from the grow all the way to your store?
Right now, 50% of the price you see on our shelf is taxes.
But where there is a cheaper substitute, customers will gravitate to more affordable illegal market.
The customer's saying, what is really my risk in going out to the illicit industry? What is my risk? Because right now, really what you're paying for in the legal industry is testing and taxes. And if testing isn't saving my life, why am I paying taxes?
This all translates into a debacle for the marijuana entrepreneur.
In 2020, we did $11.4 million in retail sales. Before federal taxes, I made $136,000 in profit. After federal taxes, I lost $80,000 as a business.
One doesn't need a degree from Wharton to know this business model is not sustainable. So what is the alternative for a legal cannabis business proprietor? Tiffany Divot, Vice President of the California Cannabis Industry Association, explains.
There are companies that are basically playing both sides of the coin and are operating in the regulated market, but then also diverting some of their materials to the illicit market in order to fund their regulated operations.
They are finding it real easy that the only way that they can find profitability and keep their businesses open is by jumping back into having 1 foot in the illegal industry and 1 foot in the legal one, because it's the only place they can kind of fund their own business.
It was naive to think that legalization and confiscatory taxation would eradicate the illicit marijuana business.
Now that there's no barriers to entry and that there's no deterrence when it comes to crime, the cartels are back. And they're back because they know how to operate in this illicit industry. And so they've not only come back to like where they were pre-2018, they've come back stronger because they're growing more here, they're robbing stores and reselling the product back into the illicit market.
Whether legal marijuana businesses gone rogue or drug cartels on steroids, one thing they both have in common: they are much less squeamish about selling to underage customers. The adult cannabis business has zero probability of an industry catering exclusively to people 21 years of age and older. Just like these kids, confiscatory corporate taxes, highly regressive state excise taxes, and state and local taxes produce a highly seductive fear of missing out, or FOMO. Bring this closer to home. On June 23rd, News Times reported 3 Danbury smoke shops were busted for illegal marijuana sales. But hold it, what about all that economic development Meg Sanders promised would follow? That impressed Mitch Ancona of Ancona's Wine and Liquors, who shared this reaction with the ECDC at their meeting on September 13th.
And I was also amazed, the young lady that spoke about her dispensary in Lee, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
She's got a freaking 100 and some odd people working for her.
Yeah.
I can't get 14 people to work for me. Like, how do you do that? That's crazy.
By the end of the meeting, ECDC Commissioner Sean Dowd raised the issue of the tight labor market's impact on restaurants and the need to import labor from neighboring towns.
So was I was on a restaurant topic. Talking to a couple of different restaurateurs, everybody's struggling with staff, right? So not a common thing. One of them asked if there was a way to, to transport, right? So like if there was kind of, if there was a way to make it more economically feasible to bring in kind of like bus and wait staff from, if they were coming from Norwalk or, Danbury or something, like where the town would kind of promote some type of commute or kind of bus or transportation or something like that to try to kind of bring staff in like on a daily basis. Has that ever been discussed? Or
the post-pandemic shortage in labor is part of a longer-term trend compounded by inflation and the surging cost of gas. Between 2005 and 2019, the number of Ridgefield employers has increased almost 18%. While jobs increased 3.9%, the labor force lagged, increasing just 3.7%. Looking at greater Ridgefield, including Danbury, Reading, and Wilton, the employers' numbers increases 15%, while jobs increased over 8%. The labor force lagged, increasing just 7.5%. The demand for labor has outpaced the supply of employees. According to the U.S. Census, in 2019, Ridgefield imported 82% of its local labor force from neighboring towns. Fast forward to 2022, and the soaring price of gas and paint at the pump is making commutation prohibitive for all workers, especially minimum and low-wage workers. So recruiting workers is a full-time, never-ending job for Ridgefield businesses. Ridgefield doesn't need more jobs right now. It needs more employees. And don't think a cannabis business would be accretive, as existing traditional good businesses will predictably flee from neighboring businesses that are incompatible with their brand. Those empty storefronts will be filled by other kinds of businesses. Just because a business is legal doesn't mean that every Skid Row business is appropriate in every town, particularly in a town such as Ridgefield, that is family-oriented, is academically rigorous in its schooling, is spiritually robust, intellectually curious, culturally dynamic, and where development and conservation and preservation thrive in harmony. What towns are more suited for the cannabis business? This is another kind of map showing the relative socioeconomic relationship of the 46 towns in Connecticut with a qualifying population of 25,000 or more. Median household incomes range from $36,000 to $206,000 from left to right on the horizontal axis. And the percent of adults with bachelor's degrees or higher range from 16% to 78% from the bottom to the top of the vertical axis. These two metrics are highly correlated with a coefficient of 0.87 for the statisticians. 12 of the 13 towns that have approved cannabis zoning cluster in the lower left of less affluent and less educated towns. West Hartford is a lone outlier. 9 of these qualifying towns, including Ridgefield, have approved moratoriums spanning the socioeconomic range of towns. The 5 qualifying towns that have chosen to prohibit cannabis are generally more affluent and well-educated. Ridgefield's closest peers, Westport and Greenwich, have said no to cannabis. There are 12 other towns with populations of less than 25,000 that have prohibited cannabis, including New Canaan and Weston, and Wilton is still under a moratorium. Ridgefield gets this instinctively as the Board of Selectmen listened to not 1, not 2, but 3 public hearings before deciding to prohibit cannabis businesses as a matter of public policy in Ridgefield.
Now that I think of it, back into those meetings I had in September, I think it was, they said, we want to hear input from the Board of Selectmen. Again, I kind of took that as probably everyone else did, that, you know, they were saying, okay, it's up to the Board of Selectmen to make the decision.
They did say that. They
Yeah,
said that the Board of Selectmen is responsible for setting a policy.
Yes.
Right.
And if the Board of Selectmen says no, then that's the policy of the town. I think if the Board of Selectmen establishes a policy with a no vote, they will accept that as meaning the town does not want to move forward. End of issue.
Right. I mean, that's the way I've read it so far.
Yep. And then that gives the opportunity for people to go and petition and raise the 1,700 signatures, whatever the 10% is. I think Wayne said we had 17,000 roughly registered voters now.
I've heard very and amazingly strong opinions, you know, on sort of both sides, and I was just able to come to one session that we had here on a Saturday morning, which was clearly the larger one, and it was somewhat balanced. I think towards the end there was clearly more of a feeling towards no, but again there were plenty. I think I had 8 people or so who very passionately talked about, you know, the need to have it.
When we first started our Community Coalition Against Alcohol and Substance Abuse, it was after a young man, 21 years old, died of an overdose on Main Street, heroin overdose. And it was a shock. You know, Main Street, Ridgefield, kind of brought a sense of reality to it. We're looking at taking money from something that we've worked so hard to try and keep our kids, especially with alcohol. I mean, the years, and it's still #1 in the schools. Vaping is running a very close second, and we all know that the oils that are out there, the THC content could be crazy. I mean, it's almost an hallucinogenic drug, and you don't want your kids getting behind the wheel with that kind of stuff on the street. And I do think that a store in our community, a dispensary, would certainly allow for a greater presence of it in our town, because what we have found that many of the kids who are at that younger age are getting it from an older sibling. I see that same type of behavior opening up in the community, and I think if we have an opportunity to help stop that we should make every effort to do so. So that's where I'm coming from. Barbara, do you want to say something?
In terms of going into the business of it, and having it as a presence on the main street when the kids are coming out of school on a Friday afternoon and coming down Main Street,
why don't we just have the motion be that the Ridgefield Board of Selectmen hereby establishes a policy not to allow any form of cannabis to be legally
Any form of cannabis business, is what you're saying, right?
business to be established in the town of Ridgefield.
That's what they were trying to get to.
How about that?
That's, yeah, no, that's exactly right, business.
So we have a motion, Barbara, seconded by Maureen. If there's no further comment, all in favor? Aye. Barbara?
Aye.
Nays? One nay. Motion carries.
Following that meeting, on April 25th, the first selectman, Rudy Marconi, sent the Planning and Zoning Commission a letter conveying the Board of Selectmen's policy decision and reasoning. The following evening of April 26th, he reminds the Commission that they asked for guidance and briefed the Commission on that guidance in person.
The Planning and Zoning Commission suggested that this is a policy decision that should be debated by the Board of Selectmen and decided there. If we were to say, yes, we want to move forward, we would send it back to P&Z to establish the regulation, location, and all the other variables that would go into that decision. If we said no on the policy, that would establish that decision. It turned out to be pretty interesting. We did hold 3 public hearings. First one, we had 4 people, the second 8, and the third about 22. It was interesting. The majority of people were against. There were some that felt it should go to a referendum. I consulted with counsel on that. Basically, it came down to 3 basic decisions we had to make. And I think Rob sent out the letter I sent that explained that we are not allowed to call a referendum on an opinion question. It would be 14 different areas. We had our discussion. The opinion of the Board of Selectmen was to vote to establish a policy. They would rather not even bother going to a referendum, that we establish a policy at that meeting, last meeting, which we voted. The motion was approved 4-1, 4 in favor of a no use policy. 1 person voted against the motion, which was the reason for it. He felt it should have gone to a referendum. And that's what is basically said in this letter here, explaining those 3 different alternatives that we had. And that's where we're at. But the Board of Selectmen voted not establish the regulation for marijuana in any of the uses. So it's a quick overview, but I'm not going to go on and be repetitious relative to a policy, which is what the P&Z Commission
In
has.
your opinion, does that obviate the need for any kind of action on the part of the planning and zoning?
Well, I would say that's a discussion of the Planning and Zoning Commission. However, I would respectfully ask that you take the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen.
When the Planning and Zoning Commission refused to act, John Noonan, John Tartaglia, and yours truly, Kurt Carr, decided the time had come to put our money where our mouths are. Our only interest is in this regulation is civic and not financial, and this application is submitted to update an outdated existing regulation before the 1-year moratorium expires, at which time this outdated regulation would remain in effect. At the same time, the Board of Selectmen, out of an abundance of caution, is simultaneously and knowingly proceeding with an ordinance that is consistent with the formerly outdated regulation and with our official town policy they promulgated after 3 public hearings.
We have been asked to give an opinion,
Right.
and that P&Z referred it back to us for policy. We set the policy. It's not been adhered to. There was a motion put and a second, and they decided to table it. It hasn't come back, and that concerns me. And
Well,
it concerns a majority of the people in this town, and that's why we would move forward with an ordinance.
Well, the reason that they got the 2 people to withdraw their motion was because of the ordinance. That was when they,
All the more reason to continue with it.
That's fine then. I mean, as long as you understand that you're gonna have a parallel process going on here. And some people think that's confusing, and that's fine.
But I feel like if there's an ordinance, there's an ordinance, right?
Right.
That's gonna supersede everything and.
Right.
And I will say, just to be totally clear, the whole reason it came to us was when they were discussing the moratorium last year.
Right.
In September, they said specifically, this is a policy issue, we would like the Board of Selectmen in.
Right, I remember that.
So they specifically asked for that, and that's.
So what is your position now? Have you all taken
What I just said.
What?
What I just stated, that we would like to move forward with a public hearing in town meeting
Oh,
to
okay.
establish an ordinance.
I,
Mr. Carr's point is that there's a parallel course going. Why don't we allow land use regulation to proceed based on his submission and the changes that he suggested, am I stating that correctly? And allow that to happen. Our concern is that that process potentially could take longer. And if the moratorium isn't extended, we could find ourselves in a conundrum if applications come in.
So now, Ridgefield Board of Selectmen will have their 4th and 5th public hearing before the town meeting on September the 7th to hopefully approve this ordinance. And Planning and Zoning has delayed opening the public hearing on A-22-1 as much as allowed by statute until August the 16th. I hope the ECDC will officially support both the updated zoning regulation and the town ordinance at the August 16th Planning and Zoning public hearing and at the Board of Selectmen public hearing on August 17th and at the town meeting on September the 7th. If as a town we can't control our irrational FOMO, fear of missing out, how on earth can we expect our children to?